Let me say it like this. You and I prep every week for things that LSU needs to do throughout the week so that they can beat their upcoming opponent. We do it every single week. We talk about it every single week. And we're going to continue doing it here tonight as we give you our 5 keys to victory. Now, I know what you're thinking. Blake, stop. Just flat out stop what you're doing. We should beat South Alabama. Yes, you should. There's a very strong possibility that you will. However, I don't want you being in a dogfight. And I know Brian Kelly came out today in his press conference. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But he came out today and he said, our team very much respects South Alabama. Well, you better show me. You better show me, because right now you're not showing me Jack Dilly's squat. You're playing to the level of your opponent. You're showing me that you are being undisciplined. Speaking of discipline, let's get to our top 5 here. So 5 things that we need to see or LSU needs to do for them to win the football game on Saturday. Number 1, you must keep discipline and contain on the quarterback. Listen, the number one thing in college football, and I mean this, the number one thing that will get you beat is a running quarterback. Now, this is why dual threat quarterbacks are so dynamic in everything that they do. You know, I look at Taylon Green at the moment. I think of Jane Daniels a year ago. I think of Jalen Milroe as another example. When you're able to pick up 10 yards if you run, or even 8 yards, and you have that ability to run, it's a very big deal. And Gio Lopez, the quarterback for South Alabama, possesses that. Now, he's not the best overall athlete. He's not a speedster. He doesn't break a lot of tackles like he's Cam Newton. He's not going to truck stick dudes like he's Tim Tebow, but he is fast enough, agile enough, and smart enough to start scrambling. And if you don't keep contained on him and be disciplined, not just on your edges, but specifically on your interior defensive line, he's going to beat you. And this would have been, for what it's worth, a game in a situation where you would have been very much utilizing a guy like Harold Perkins. Guys, this is a game that Harold Perkins feeds off of, right? Like 100%, this would have been a Harold Perkins type of game, because you could have just spied your quarterback and you could have used him to keep and contain Gio Lopez, and you could have told Braden Swinson, go get him, big dog. We got Perk behind you. Just go get him. I don't know if you can do that unless you're going to do that with Whit Weeks, and there's also a possibility that you can do that. It's going to be interesting to see how Blake Baker does. But more than anything, I feel like I know that your front seven can be disciplined. You know, there's not a lot of times, very rarely, that I can name like 3 or 4 already this season, at least once a game, that your front seven hasn't been disciplined. Mainly a lot of it has been when there have been situations is that they get physically dominated. Or it's something physical, like they're worn down and they don't finish a drive off well. Or, you know, Whit Weeks gets, you know, a guard gets to the second level on Whit Weeks and then all hell starts breaking loose. But your front seven has been somewhat, from an assignment standpoint and discipline standpoint, been pretty good. But I need to see your entire defense start having some discipline. Because, guys, even though South Alabama is not a team that could or should or would, however you want to put it, to walk in here and beat you, they do possess things with their running game and a mobile quarterback that they can stay around. And quite honestly, you've played to the level of your opponent every single week. Let's just call it what it is. You've had moments like you did in the second half in the last 2 games that you play where you've dominated down the stretch, but you can't keep teams around like this and give them hope. It's not just the front seven that's got to keep discipline. Man, at some point, so does your back end, especially at safety. Guys, at this point, if they don't get it, then I don't know what to say. And Brian Kelly was also asked about a safety room. And you could tell the people that ask those questions either listen to the show or, number 2, that they know what they're talking about, in the sense that they, look, man, the guys that play, the 3 safeties that play on an every down basis, now that I think that you're going back to that star role more than people probably want to, the 3 safeties that will be on the field at any given moment have to be disciplined. You know, I thought against USC, it was the most disciplined game that I'd seen your defense play in a long time. You know, I think of Jordan Allen doing some really good things, Jordan Gilbert, and a lot of people hated on him because of the targeting call that he got, but I don't hate him for that. He was still there. He still made a right play. Finish, don't target, and you could have made the play there. That's more or less what I'm really worried about from a season-long standpoint. You got to stay disciplined on defense. Like, guys, I really do think this. I think that, well, actually, it's not really a think. The explosive plays are coming off you being boneheaded. I mean, to this point, you haven't physically been dominated. Now, if you don't start getting more disciplined, if you don't start living in football ops, going through film, stop worrying about yourself and going out. I mean, guys, this is as high performance as you're ever going to get, some of you. You need to be living in football ops, man. But the number one thing I promise you is if you don't stay disciplined, if you don't make the right reads on defense, it's going to be a problem. Number two, take your shots offensively, but when you start throwing the ball down the field, and look, I really do feel like you are going to start throwing the ball down the field in this one to start off. South Alabama's 117th, at least you should. South Alabama's 117th in the country in passing yards allowed. Teams that are less talented than you have thrown all over them. Well, Blake, it's only 4 weeks. Yeah, well, South Alabama hasn't played anybody, and teams have been able to run or to throw on them. They've been able to line up and throw on them. The thing about throwing the ball down the field, though, and talking about discipline again, I need to see better decision-making. Now, a lot of you have criticized me on this, and that's fine. I think if Nuss, who is learning and building, trust with his receivers, building as a starter in this league, if he starts getting a little bit more crisp on some of the decision-making that he's doing, he's going to go from borderline being, which I think he is right now, really good to really great. You know, I don't want to see you throwing fade routes to Kyron Lacy when he's, for a second, third, fourth straight time, if the DB on the outside corner is in bump and run man-to-man coverage and he can't separate. Now, does Chris Hilton coming back, do they give him his final shot? I do not know. But what I do know is that C.J. Daniels, Aaron Anderson have had massive opportunities to where they could have been in the end zone if you hit the right target. You know, I look in this specific thing. I feel like that what has happened with this offense when they have gone anemic, when they have not been able to move the ball, in my humble opinion, what has been happening is that the pre-snap decision has already been made before we're throwing the football. And what I'm saying is, don't make that decision. Do and give what the defense is giving you. You know, the one thing that I think down the stretch that has happened here with Nussmeier has easily been that he's making decisions before he even claps his hands. Now, sometimes you got to do that. Hot routes, teams sending pressure on you, those, like, it's not few and far between. Like, you're going to have to make some of those decisions before the snap and know the coverage. But he's premeditating where he needs to go with the football when other guys are wide open. He sees something. You know, I wouldn't mind him taking the clock down to 3-2 or 3-2 like Joe did. Joe processed everything that he gave you before he would throw the football. And it's not just Joe that does that. A lot of the great guys that like to sit in the pocket do that. Guys, Peyton Manning did it. Tom Brady did it. Because you're going to show me what you're going to do on third down when it's 3 seconds, 2 seconds. You're going to really start getting into what you need to do. Processing, I think, is a big thing. Again, I think Nuss has been really good. I think he's got a whole nother gear with this offense in the passing game that if he opens, guys, if he goes and gets that key and unlocks that door, I'm not going to say you're going to beat Ole Miss, but there are guys wide open that he's got to hit that he can hit. Guys, if he takes that next step, I mean, there comes a point where I think that you're looking at Nuss and saying, hey, man, like this is some insane stuff that we're seeing. So I just think that I'm aggravated because I feel like it's a week-to-week thing where you got these guys open. Multiple times CJ Daniels has been on a dig route and you've missed him every single time. Like, are we not getting to that point in film? Is Garrett living up at football ops? Is he living up at football ops in the sense of like the last two guys that were above him that were great did? It takes work to be elite. Stop premeditating your decision, but continue to take the shots because they are not good in their secondary at all. One other thing I'd say about the offense, and we'll finish out with defense here. Guys, you got to be able to run the football at a high clip this weekend. Let me tell you why. Somebody said in the chat earlier, I'm sorry, and we had a brief discussion. I think it was Spectrum Wellcare who said this. But it's really right here on the handy-dandy notebook. I agree with him on this too. Guys, their D-line is small. They're small. I don't mean this in a wrong way, but you should be able to line up and punch them square in their mouth. You should be able to run for 150 to 200 on them. I mean, I hate to say it, like, guys, they are not a big defensive line. I mean, I think the biggest guy that they have on their defensive line is like 6'3", 280, maybe. Maybe there's another kid that was playing the 1-tech, 3-tech. I mean, he was a white kid, and he might be 5'11", maybe 275, 280. Guys, if you can't line up and run it right at them and punch them square in their nose, I'm going to be very disappointed. I really want to be in a sense where you look at this offensive line and say, you know what, bro? Finally, for once this season, they lined up and punched somebody. I know a lot of you believe and feel that this offense has been really good. I don't necessarily disagree with you. But they're in the early 50s when it comes to total offense. They've been bad in the red zone. They haven't been converting there. I think when Brian Kelly talks about his team as a whole, I think he leans more offense, even though he doesn't want to say it. Guys, you're so many small steps away from you busting loose. I would love to see that to happen, especially in the running game, before you go into a bye week and then get to Ole Miss. I just feel like that you should be like, here's how I feel about it. And we talked about this similar last week, right? Like there was a similar situation in the UCLA that we talked about that an opponent did on them, and you were better than that opponent, but the opponent did it better than you did. Remember last week we talked about Indiana's wide receivers was just able to make and get massive separation against UCLA's DBs. I mean, guys, massive separation. So much separation that divorce attorneys were starting to smile at how much they were getting. Guys, it's the complete opposite in this one. I've seen Ohio line up and run it right at South Alabama and literally punch them in the mouth. And I know that you have a more talented offensive line than they do. I know that you do. You know that they do. It doesn't really change the fact, though, that you have not shown the capacity at the current moment that you can just line up and do it. Now, I do think on those 2 90-yard drives you did against UCLA, really I do. I think that got very much missed, right? Because we look at Garrett, we look at this guy, we look at that guy. Very much missed, not missed by this guy, I'll tell you, but very much missed that LSU on 2 90-yard scoring drives last week. You ran the football pretty freaking good. You guys, I'll be highly, highly disappointed, and we'll come in here on the post-game show and just be so pissed off because you're in a situation where you couldn't just line up and run it against a defensive line that's not that great. All right, a couple more here. Number 4, no explosive plays. Look, we talked about this earlier, but I want to mention this. Guys, I don't agree with Brian Kelly when he said that UCLA had no explosive plays on offense. That's just not true. Just not true. I don't know what he considers explosive, but there were multiple screens and checkdowns that you gave up that went for 20 plus. Multiple. And I'm going to continue to preach this. I know that I talked about the contain at number one and the back end needs to be disciplined, and I kind of put 1 and 4 together, and it's just the same thing. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Guys, you got to be more disciplined. I mean, it is as much of a fact. Like when Brian Kelly came here, we all thought that his teams would be the most disciplined that we'd seen in a while. Guys, it's been the complete opposite. Complete opposite. These defenses, all 3 defenses he's had, all of these guys, common mistakes, easy mistakes. No explosive plays. Also, number 2. Or number 5, last thing here before we get to some Brian Kelly comments and then to the SEC and then your questions. I really, really hope Blake Baker sells out in stopping the run game against this team. If you get South Alabama in passing downs, I'm not 1,000% sure that I think that they can create plays because Lopez can run and get out of the pocket. Guys, if just take away their running game and play man-to-man coverage early and see what happens. Because I feel like if you're able to take away most of their running game, Gio Lopez is not going to beat you from the pocket. He's not going to beat you throwing the football. You might give up maybe 10 points. Problem is, though, I just don't know if you're going to do that. Now, I've heard a lot of people in the media that I love and I trust, and I think they know a lot about football. And maybe they're right and because they disagree about what I'm about to say. But here's what I am going to say. I think a lot of people have been talking like craziness about this defense. Really, I do. I mean, like they gave up 14 rushing yards last week, and you would have thought that they were just abysmal. Now, did they give up 2 touchdowns they have no business giving up? Yeah, they did. Yes. Eric Bieniemy is going to Eric Bieniemy. I'm going to chalk it up to that. But I'm going to tell you, man, a lot of people that I talk to and respect, either locally or nationally, a lot of people think that South Alabama can come in here and put 28 up on you. And I just don't know if that's the case. I don't know if I'm with that. You better hope that they can't. South Alabama has not played anybody like you. But the problem with that is even though that they have not gone up against the same equivalent of talent as you, the issues that I currently sit in is I know that I still feel like that this team's going to play down to their opponent. I guess the last thing that I'd wrap up here is saying is this. I don't know of all of these 5 things, like starting fast, making right decisions, no mental mistakes. I don't feel like this team could do it right now. I really don't. If you ask me, I think that there is a small chance that you're going to be in a little bit of a dogfight early. If you ask me. Because I don't know if I trust this team to not play down to the level of their opponent.